Good morning, everybody. This is Emelita Baylon again. It's a pleasure to be your mentor for today, talking about assessment effectively in remote setup. As I mentioned, for those of you who knew me for quite some time, thank you for being here again today. And for those who have not seen me for any other topics, my name is Emelita Baylon. I am a junior and senior high school faculty from De La Salle Santiago Isabel from the Vermosa campus, and I'm also one of the School G ambassadors, a School G champion here in the Philippines. So for today, we're very fortunate to be talking about assessment and how to effectively assess kids, our students in a remote setup. Alongside, we'll talk about a little bit of feedback, how feedback is going to be very important. It's stages, kinds, and I'll be providing you tips on how to be able to provide effective feedback in a remote setup. As I will always tell everybody, in a remote setup, it's important that we have to give premium to the different stakeholders of the educational sector. It's not only, yes, it is about the student, but it's not always about the student. It's also about us, teachers, administrators, who will be important, who will be instrumental in engaging with the students and at the same time fostering a better learning environment for the kids who's going to be under our ward. Before we begin, I invite everybody, for those of you who are listening to me right now, I invite everybody to respond to paulev.com/ebailon500. If you may share your ideas, what do you think is an ideal effective assessment for you? Utilize again the link paulev.com/ebailon500. I'll be giving everybody a few minutes to be able to give and send the responses online. Again, it's paulev.com/ebailon, B-A-Y, that's EBAYLON 500 to send your response. So this is an important tool that we can utilize for us to be able to elicit feelings about our students when we do remote learning. All Everywhere is integrated with Microsoft. You can put it in your PowerPoint so that you could be able to elicit right away from your students some ideas in which they will be involved with your presentation, and you could be able to get real-time feedback from the students under your ward. So again, Paul Everywhere for doing formative assessments. Okay. All right. Okay. Let me give you some 2 minutes to give you time to be able to encode your responses. Again, it's paulev.com/ebaylon500. Thank you. An effective assessment is one that is able to measure the student's understanding of the lesson before and during after teaching it. Right? Thank you for those who answered it. It shows the skill achieved by the students before, during, and after learning. Thank you. Okay. I would love to hear other things from everybody. Thank you. It's an effective assessment is one that is able to measure. Effective assessment is that which is really crafted based on students' individual capacity. I like that response. It is based on how students are able to learn something from whatever we're sharing to them, whatever we're teaching them. Excellently given. Other things? Let's wait for other responses to come. Right. So again, Paul Everywhere is a way for you to make your PowerPoint, your presentation files interactive. This can be embedded in your Google Slides. It can also be embedded in your PowerPoint presentations so that you can also involve your audience in making your PowerPoint effective, you're making your presentation file effective, and you can also engage with them. Here's another answer. An effective assessment measures individual learning through learning. I like that idea. Very good. It's also getting ideas from the learners that's under your ward. Thank you very much for those responses. All right. One more minute before I proceed to my next slide. Again, Paul Everywhere. You can utilize Paul Everywhere. Later on in the course of the discussion, I'll be giving you other ways on how to be able to utilize Paul Everywhere in our discussion. Right. That's nice rather. So through Paul Everywhere, there's a real-time data that's coming into your presentation file, and right away you could be able to really elicit ideas from your audience. How exactly do they feel about the topic at hand that you're imparting to them? So again, Paul Everywhere, right? So an effective assessment endures that our students are able to achieve the objectives that we set for the day's lesson. I like that. It ensures rather that our students are able to learn to and elicit and be able to really showcase the kind of things that you wanted them to learn for that specific meeting. And it's also able to point out that students to point out to students where they want to go and where they are in the learning process. Very good. And in this answers that you're showing, you're giving everybody an overview of how assessment can be vital in the teaching learning process. You can differentiate students, and it can also allow you to differentiate instructions, and at the same time it can assess the learner's understanding of the lesson and can provide feedback to teachers on how to manage their class. Excellently done. And it helps you analyze the learnings of the students. Excellent idea. All the ideas given by the participants, thank you very much for those who participated. These are ways on how to be able to really understand what makes an assessment really effective. But allow me to go deeper into what assessment really is and how effective, how important is assessment in the engagement of learning, right? Let's try defining first what assessment is, right? Assessment is, of course, according to Dr. Lorna Earle and Dr. Stephen Katz, who wrote Rethinking Classroom Assessment with a Purpose in Mind, which is a very vital reference of our module for today. It is designed to provide evidence of achievement. And it's not only to provide evidence of achievement to parents, to educators like us about the students under our ward, but it's also a way to look for students to look at themselves, and sometimes students referring to themselves in reference to other groups, example, to their classmates, or even to students being compared to other students of other educational institutions, or even us teachers. Our performance as teachers can also be utilized in comparison to our colleagues, or even in comparison to other people working in other education institutions. So again, data is very important. When you talk about assessment, data is very important so that we could utilize this data in creating better decisions, not only to better instruction, but to better the way we do deliver our services for our ward, for the students under our ward, or even deliver our relationships with the people around us. So that's how important assessment is to us. But if we talk about assessment, there are as education trends would develop in the 21st century, assessment oftentimes is perceived as done in the latter part of the teaching learning process. When actually, if we're going to look at the development of education trends in the 21st century, assessment can be done before, during, and even after the learning process, the teaching learning process. And Dr. Lorna Earle and Dr. Stephen Katz Stephen Katz provided us that new perspective that when we study assessment, it has to be in the different avenues, in the different facades of our teaching learning process. Allow me to look into the differences between assessment of learning, assessment for learning, and assessment as learning, so that we could be able to deepen more our perspectives of how we're going to be able to really effectively assess not only ourselves as teachers of our students, but also assess the students as they go through the teaching learning process. Allow me first to look into assessment of learning. When we talk about assessment of learning, normally this is the assessment that normally would become public, and normally these are the results of statements or the symbols of how well we know teaching. So normally, when we talk about assessments of learning, these are the things that are normally standardized, normally that are given to the students so that we could be able to compare them to the standards that we set, so that we would know that if they are achieving the goals that we set for them. So example, at the end of the year, normally students are given standardized assessments by our own Department of Education. We have a lot of standardized tests to be able to see where they are as they go through the teaching learning process for the end of the year. Or they have personality tests so that we could be able to check um, behavioral patterns, or we could be able to know patterns that they have, so that we could be able to help out in improving the way they develop their behavior in the teaching learning process. Or there are also a lot of um, tests that we can conduct so that we could be able to get to know our students well as they go through the teaching learning process. So again, assessment for learning is normally about comparing our teaching learning process in the ideas of how it is standard, how it is in the standard world, and how far we are, how the students fare in the teaching learning process that they underwent with us. So that's assessment of learning. In assessment for learning, according again to Dr. Lorna Earle, teachers are utilizing assessment as an investigative tool so that we could be able to find out how exactly students know and how can they do things and what are the confusions that they encounter so that the preconceptions or gaps may be addressed right away. Here in assessment for learning, we are now looking into the process of how we teach the students so that they could be able to deepen learning of the topics or the skills that we wanted them to get into. So in assessment for learning, formative assessments are vital so that we could be able to elicit data that would enable us to check preconceptions, misconceptions, and from those pre and misconceptions, we could be able to utilize those things so that we could fill gaps and correct misconceptions or confusions and eventually lead them to learn the right way. So those are things that we focus into when we talk about assessments for learning. Lastly, when we talk about assessments as learning, in this aspect, processes students can learn about themselves as learners are given premium for this in this case, and we're also giving the students an opportunity to become aware of how they learn and how metacognitive knowledge, or we give them a way to look into and reflect into how they were able to learn the entire process, how they're able to really learn. We focus now on providing them voices so that by providing them voices, they could be able to share. And us teachers, we could be able to learn from those ideas that they share from us. And they can also reflect, showcase evidences of how they were able to learn and undergo the teaching learning process. So in this case, metacognition and introspection is given importance. And at the same time, we are also providing students an avenue to really showcase pieces of evidence that they indeed learn from us. Here, I was able to explain to you that assessment is not only done or conducted after the learning process, that even before the learning process or even during the learning process, assessments can be conducted, can be institutionalized, or can be instituted so that the students or the teachers can also be able to provide an idea, a perspective of where they are as they go through the teaching learning process. Again, those are the difference between assessments for learning, assessments of learning, and assessment as learning. There you have it. Okay? When we talk about assessments, a well-conducted assessment, particularly in a remote setup for me, would be important. It is very important because we're not just teaching them. We're not going to give them something that would only be given because it's just required for them. When we talk about assessment, it should one provide motivation for students to really do work. That's why if I may, I'm sure you're able to encounter Dr. Angela Duckworth, who wrote Grit. It's important that we really motivate our students so that they could create that growth mindset, right? Which is also mentioned by Dr. Carol Dweck. It's important for them to be motivated to do work so that they won't feel failure as a hindrance for them to really showcase what exactly in they would not feel that failure is a hindrance for them to learn. Motivation is important. It's a key for teachers like us to really push them to do work. And how do we be able to motivate our students, engage them, and allow them to be able to understand achievement so that those engagements and achievements in that specific learning process would be able to allow them to really improve and at the same time push themselves to go further in the teaching learning process. Alongside, it's important also in the remote setup that we provide ongoing assessment. Ongoing assessment, why ongoing assessment? It's because these assessments would provide students an opportunity to really know where exactly they are in the process in teaching a certain content or even teaching a certain skill. And at the same time, it's also providing them an opportunity to really know how would they be able to improve those things that they really need to improve on. And as teachers, it's important also that we engage with the people who are around them, particularly parents. Those people are into the basic education the department. It's important also that we elicit the help of our parents because by doing ongoing feedback, we are also providing parents an opportunity, an eye view of how they could be instrumental in helping their children to undergo the learning process that we're going to be having remotely. Ongoing assessment will also provide an opportunity for ongoing feedback. Why important? Why feedback is important in assessment, in assessing students' learning and skills? Later, I will go through that. I will deepen that idea in a bit. Okay. Now, and oftentimes when we talk about assessment, we have this notion that assessments are done either in a formative way or in a summative way. These are the typical types of assessments that we are engaged with when we talk about assessments of learning or assessments for learning and assessments of learning. So we have summative assessments, which are according to the prioritized standards, and normally it assesses deeper learning or mastered or probably reinforced skills on a specific content. And normally it provides an opportunity for students to apply certain real concepts, life concepts, and it's often based on research, but sometimes it may also be posting challenges or detriments if given across multiple disciplines. So it's important that when we do summative assessment, we really plan about it. We really need to think hard about it. And it's also important that the criteria that we're going to be utilizing in grading these summative assessments should be well explained to the students and even to the people around them who will be helping them so that we could really be able to assess deeper learning and so that we could be able to really engage with the students if they're able to master the skills that we wanted them to master. That's summative assessment. On the other hand, formative assessment would also be something that would provide evidence that learners are really engaged and participating in the teaching learning process. That even before the learning process, we're already eliciting misconception and preconceptions. So we could be able, from the data that we're already eliciting from them, we could be able to really check where they are, and we could be able to utilize that as a demonstrable measure of learners' progress within the course. As they go through the teaching process, we are already providing them insights of where they are in the process. And it's also a way to provide feedback to learners by giving them formative assessments, by providing them exercises. It's a way for us teachers to provide feedback to our learners. And lastly, it's also an opportunity for learners to apply knowledge and skills. And of course, provide us an opportunity to really correct where they lack understanding, to fill the gaps, and at the same time for us to be able to really check if they're able to really understand those things that they really need to understand so that they can go up the ladder. That's the difference between a formative and a summative assessment. Although in the latter part of this module, in the modules or in the next lessons to come, we will also be digging deeper into the importance of authentic assessments. How are we able to provide students an avenue or an opportunity to create authentic assessments, which will be helpful for them to understand real world scenarios? Because oftentimes when we talk about summative assessments, it's helpful to check as they go through building knowledge and skills in learning the teaching learning process. However, it's really important for us educators to really check if our students are really ready for them to understand what's really going on in the real world. We have to be able to set the right norms for them to really be able to be motivated and to really further understand the real world, so that we don't only teach them content, we got to give them the right skills so that we could prepare them as they leave the four walls of the classroom. They are prepared to embark the standards of how they're going not only to check higher order learning, and also they could be able to really embark on what are the skills and the demands of work that they're going to be facing as they leave the four walls of the classroom. So those are the types of assessment that we often conduct, that we conduct in remote learning. But how do we really effectively assess? I'm going to provide you 7 tips, which I hope would be able to guide you as we go through assessing things. In the next part of the module, which would be in the next days, in the next Saturdays to come, the next 3 Saturdays to come, I will be providing you certain applications that would be helpful in providing formative assessments, summative assessments, and even ways on how to be able to create authentic assessments, which could enable you to have more time and more opportunities to provide effective ways to help teachers or to help you look into your students in a remote setup. Allow me to continue first on a general scale. How do we really provide effective assessment? First, it's important that your assessment is often, or it's really linked, provided very well linked to your course objectives or to the goals, to the learning goals that you set for your students. In the module that I gave you, in the module that I prepared for this discussion, it's important. There's a video there in our module which emphasizes the importance of linking your goal, your learning goals, in setting your assessments. Why so? Because by creating clear links of your assessment to your learning goals, students would easily see the relevance of why you teach these content, these skills to them, and they would be able, it would also provide meaningful motivation and meaningful achievements as they go through the teaching learning process. That's number 1. Number 2, it's important that you also add assessments in every part of your course. You don't just wait the latter part of your course to be able to give assessments. It's good that you provide assessments even in the other parts of your discussion. You can even provide pre-assessments so that you could be able to check if they have misconceptions or preconceptions about the topics that you're going to introduce to them. You can utilize those data in teaching to them how exactly should they be able to understand content that you're presenting to them. Those are going to be helpful data that would enable you to really provide a dig dive or deeper dive rather on a certain skill or even a topic or content that you're giving your students. So that's important. Add assessments. Don't wait for the latter part of the latter part of the don't wait for the latter part of the term or don't wait for the latter part of the unit before you give assessments. Provide avenues for them to really showcase their skill so that from there you can already guide them. If they're making a mistake, it's okay. If they're creating misconceptions, those are opportunities, learning opportunities for us teachers to correct those misconceptions so that we could be able to see things, they could be able to see the things that you're also providing to them. And lastly, when you provide assessments in different parts of your remote learning design, you're also providing various learning paths for the students to be able to really engage well with the course that you're creating. It's important that we provide various learning paths so that they could be able to really see if they're understanding it the right way. They're understand, and they can also themselves, they can also create some introspection and correct those things so that when you provide them consultation time remotely, they could be able to ask right questions. Assessment would also be, I believe, assessing students can also provide avenues for students to ask right questions. Because as they ask the right questions, you are also providing them opportunities to clarify and at the same time opportunities to see how are they able to correct misconceptions and learn the way they're good at. So add assessments in every part of your course. Third, it's important also that that you form questions that would address not only lower order thinking skills, provide questions that would address higher order thinking skills. Why so? Because again, we don't only bombard. There's a tendency for us in remote learning when we teach them online. There's a tendency for us to provide them, bombard them with a lot of data. But are these data really shaping them, preparing them for the things that they needed to go through? That's important. We need to be able to utilize all those knowledge so that they could be able to learn skills, form skills, and as they form skills, they also create attitudes and valuable behavior that would be significant for the way they're going to react in different stimuli that they're going to be encountering as they go through the teaching learning process. So form questions. When we assess, it's important that the questions we ask them, it's not only on the lower order thinking questions, it should also higher order thinking in nature. Let's also provide students, give students an opportunity to do self-assessment so that they could check if things became easy for them, if things became difficult for them, and if things were difficult for them, what caused these difficulties, and if they're able to channel these difficulties, these things can also be an avenue for us teachers to also do introspection ourselves so that by knowing where the students are having difficulty in that topic, we could also use that for review opportunities. We could also utilize that in ensuring that before they go the higher level or before departing that specific content, the students are able to clarify and ensure to themselves that the difficulty will now eventually be transformed into clarity so that if that skill is a requisite to another topic or another course, it will be easier for them to to manipulate their gears. It would be easier for them to understand further how to be able to cope that specific idea or that specific content that we are presenting to them. Fifth, it's important that to really prioritize what exactly do we want the students really to learn. It's important that we really prioritize what to assess. Stop. There's important. There's a necessity for us teachers to really stop assessing everything. We need to put priority on the things that we have to prioritize. Why? Why is it important to give priority to the things that we need to prioritize? Because it's not only going to be taxing on the part of the students, it would also in a way provide some toxicity on our end because we're being piled up with a lot of things. We're being piled up with a lot of data that sometimes it will not be utilized, it will not be relevant on how are we going to be able to really showcase how much the students are learning for that specific topic. We need to showcase to our students important things that we need to that would that would showcase where they are in the process. That's why properly select what exactly or where exactly in the course should you put the assessment parts so that it will not be taxing also on your part as your teachers, because in remote learning it's important that you give back feedback, um, timely feedback, not necessarily real-time feedback, but of course if you can give real-time feedback, better. But we got to give timely feedback to our students. It's important that this feedback can be timely given to our students, plainly because we need to be able to give them an insight of where they are in the course of learning. We need to ensure that learning would be on the real criteria. What does real mean in assessment, right? Allow me to, okay, allow me to look into the meaning of real in the idea of assessment. Important that we really classify these things in utilizing this assessment for us to be able to really check where the students are in prioritizing their role as teachers. It's important that our students are aware of where they are as they go through the teaching learning process, and at the same time we would be able to really check, we would be able to prioritize ourselves as teachers. What skill do we really want them to focus on? Because otherwise, it would put burden on all of us. It would put a lot of difficulty as we go through the teaching learning process. So important, it's really important that we really utilize essential criteria if we teach our students online, when we teach our students online. So those are the things that we really need to give premium into when we teach them online. So that's fifth. We go straight to assigning performance tasks. Again, it's also important that we focus on students' authentic assessments, that will ensure that these students will be given opportunities to explore on solving problems that will help them find solutions to real life problems and explore the realities of the world. Because again, by providing those simulations, we are giving them an opportunity to see how real life works, and at the same time, it would also prepare them as they embark the journey of doing work after they leave the four walls of the classroom. So providing performance tasks that would set criteria, clear criteria that would gauge skills and knowledge about a certain real life scenario would also be effective in assessment. And last but definitely not the least, here's one thing that we always, well, often teachers would go into when you do remote learning. We have this perception that when students are doing work remotely, they're doing it at the comforts of their homes. That things are done easy when actually they're children, right? And they're still building their skills on. If we as adults are also experiencing difficulty, much more our students, I am sure that in one way or another, if we give them piling work, it would definitely cause them to encounter a lot of difficulties in the teaching learning process. That's why it's important that we manage the task we give to our students. It's essential that we provide them an opportunity, a limitation of how are we going to manage the time, and not only the time, the task that we're giving the students. Otherwise, they would feel burdened. They would feel that there's a lot of things being given to them, and it would not end up beneficial to them because they would just end up not doing the work at all because it ends up piled up. Meaning, ang dami-dami na nilang trabaho, hindi nila natatapos yung trabaho kasi akala natin bilang teacher, nandun lang lahat sa magagawa nila lahat yung trabaho kasi nasa bahay lang sila. When actually, they're also experiencing a lot of anxiety when they do remote learning. Imagine doing 7 subjects, and our subject is not the only subject in the curriculum that I'm sure they're going to go into. They need to be able to really manage not only their time, but even manage the tasks that they need to do so that they could be able to effectively provide us avenues on how to be able to really prove to us that they really indeed learn something. So that's how we could effectively provide assessment. And for me, Schoology can also be a helpful tool. It can also be an innovative tool for us to provide avenues for assessment. It's an innovative tool for learning. It's an innovative tool to assess because in Schoology there are a lot of menus in Schoology that would be able to allow our students to be assessed not only on the knowledge level. It can also provide us an opportunity to assess our students in the skill level and even go higher order thinking. It can also be an inclusive tool for teaching and learning because in Schoology, we have tools that would provide more inclusivity, more embraced avenues for us to be able to be accessible, not only for those who are having for those who are having difficulty, example, hearing or seeing, we can provide inclusive tools for us to be able to really help our students cope in the teaching learning process. Another feature of Schoology would be allowing the students or allowing other app platforms or applications which can be easily integrated in the Schoology learning management system. In the next days to come, I will be showcasing to you how exactly can Schoology be a helpful tool or can be a good platform where you can integrate other apps which can provide more engagement, which can provide more data for you to really ensure that assessment is really well taught or well done in your teaching learning process. And lastly, it's the school away from school. So even if the students are in the comforts of their homes, as long as design is well thought of, as long as assessment is well placed, anywhere in the teaching learning process, Schoology can provide an avenue for safety and security. And at the same time, students can easily access all the things that they need to be able to do as they go through the teaching learning process. Again, I invite everybody to click your feelings, put your feelings on, pin your feelings. As we go through assessing remotely, how do you feel about it? Again, I invite everybody to go paulev.com/ebaylon. Kindly pin where you feel as we go through the ideas of teaching or assessing remotely. Okay? Knowing those ideas that I introduced to you, how do you feel now about assessing remotely? I'm giving you like a few minutes to go. before we be able to transfer on effective feedback. Okay? Thank you, right? Thank you for those people who pinned yellow green. So I'm very happy that people felt good about assessment. Still people, okay lang, yellow. But I hope that as we go through as we go through the course, that feeling will transfer to the other side of the fence, which will either be a yellow green or a green. Right. Thank you for the feedback. Again, Paul Everywhere is a good tool that you can utilize to make your PowerPoint more interactive, more for making your students more participative as you go through the teaching learning process. So I invite everybody to utilize this so that you could make your students part. This is part of assessment. After the learning process, you get to elicit feelings. By eliciting feelings, you are already enabling, you're using that data to check and provide introspection amongst not only yourself as a student, as a teacher rather, but to students. They could be able to gauge themselves where they are as they go through the process. So by now, this is their feeling. Perhaps as they go through again the learning process, they could be able to really deepen their knowledge about assessment. Right. Okay. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Right. Thank you for those who gave their feedback. For those of you who gave their answers on this segment, thank you for the 5 people who placed who pinned their answers on the yellow green. Thank you for thank you for the participant who pinned her answer on the yellow one. As we go through the module, I hope that we would be able to really improve on that. And hopefully, we could be able to fully understand assessment of learning, for learning, and even as learning. Right? Feedback. When we talk about assessment, it's essential that we could be able to understand what exactly is the essential of feedback. Why do we really give feedback? Because the information that we get from feedback, whether from a teacher, whether from a peer, or even from a book that you read, or even from a computer program, or from an application that you utilize, or even from an experience that you went through, these are essential information. These are essential aspects of students' performance. It could provide you an insight of the performance of a student or it could also provide us knowledge on how we could be able to build up on a certain learning experience. Why are they important? Because they are critical in ensuring that teaching and learning was effective. It could be able to provide us an insight if the audience or the students who underwent that idea were able to get something out of the process. Number 2, it could provide also teacher practice on improving your students' experience or even the process of allowing the students to really look into the process and provide you where they are in the idea. It could also provide you an insight of how they were engaged in the process by simply showcasing their motivations. By providing them feedback, you could also motivate the students in investing more effort, in investing more hard work so that they could be able to push through for achievement and improvement. And second to the last, it could also provide a support on what kind of processes were underwent or undergone rather to be able to check better performance. By giving you feedback, you would know if your strategies are good, if your strategies are not good, and if they're not good, how could you be able to modify these strategies? And lastly, it could also provide an opportunity for students to do introspections. Because oftentimes as teachers, we because we're pressed for time, we got a lot of things to do, our work is so piled up, oftentimes we fail to provide students in thinking or providing them to really share what were their experiences, how did they go through the teaching learning process. And it's important for us, for as educators, to provide students metacognitive strategies so that we could be able to really set goals, plan for things, monitor, and even reflect on how they're able to go through the teaching learning process. And by doing so, we can do that through feedback. And feedback can be done in different stages. We can do it in the instructional design, or how we call it feed up. We can already ensure that as we design our lesson, we are already providing students opportunities on where we can provide them feedback in the teaching learning process, or how as to how we are able to design our instructional design by providing them already the path that they're going to undergo as they learn that specific content. So in feed up, you provide them their learning goals. By providing them their learning goals, you are already providing them an insight of what are the things that they're going to be doing in the teaching learning process. So that's one. By going through feedback, you are focused on providing them monitoring. You are focused on providing them assessing, so that as they go through learning with you, you are already telling them certain things that they need to improve on, certain things that they need to focus on, so that before they jump the next content, or the next skill that they need to have, you already provided them ways on how to be able to improve on these things. That's feedback. And third, feed forward. In the next steps, what are the things that they need to prepare for as they continue learning process? Are they ready for the next learning process? Can they be able to endure the next learning process? Are they able to endure the next learning process? Are they able to really are they able to really confirm themselves by their level of assessment? Can they confirm it to themselves that they're ready for the next learning process? Or will that learning process be a leverage for them to be able to be ready or be courageous enough in undergoing the next topics or the next skills to come? So feed forward is looking through the next steps. When they go to the next steps, are they ready to go to the next step, or will they be afraid to go to the next step? So you are giving them already those insights so that they will not be afraid to continue the teaching learning process. So that's the stages of providing feedback in the teaching learning process. However, where do we provide feedback, or how should we provide feedback as teachers? Are we only focused on providing feedback on the task that they did, or where else can we provide feedback? So these are the levels of feedback that we can give our students when they undergo the teaching learning process. First, we can provide task feedback, meaning by task feedback, you are already providing them an insight of what kind of an output were they able to produce in the process of creating that specific activity. So you are giving them on the final output, these are the things that you saw. You describe to them what exactly did you see in the final output that they were able to accomplish. So that's the task feedback. So again, you provide them an insight, or perhaps in if you have a rubric that would guide you in helping you grade those students, their set of criteria that you set up for them to achieve as they produce that specific activity. You utilize those things in describing the kind of output that you saw in the latter part of your activity. So that's a task feedback. A process feedback, on the other hand, is before they end up producing the output, you as a teacher you as the faculty advisor or the educator, you're already providing them ways on how to improve the work. So example, if I'm an English teacher, before they submit the final thesis, you give them insights on the writing style, on the insights on how they're able to provide in that specific thesis. You also provide insights on aside from writing skills, grammar, or other aspects of writing, so that as they go through the process, you provide them an opportunity to improve the way they produce the final task. So that's the process feedback. Before they even produce the final output, you are already in the watch, you are already looking into, you're already providing them an opportunity to improve themselves before they even produce the final thing that they're going to submit to you. And from that, you can check if they're really integrating the suggestions that you provide. And if not, you would see that as they submit the task, you would see that as they submit the final output. Lastly, personal feedback or personal level. So example, you're having discussions when you say, these are normally when you give them affirmations or confirmation that they really give excellent um, ideas when you see them every day. So example, when you see them on synchronous learning, when you provide them insights on how they behave. Example, oh, your idea is great. I like that idea. Or you provide them very good, continue doing that. So you're providing them more motivation so that they could continue working and be persevering in doing the task that you're doing. So personal feedback, from the term itself, you're providing them an opportunity to be motivated in engaging a specific task that you give them. So feedback can be given in three levels. It's either given on a task level, performance level, or a process level. I invite everybody to watch this short clip, which will provide us 6 ways on feedback giving. In this video of Edutopia, we provide them an opportunity, one, not only to give feedback. As teachers, we're not the only one who could provide feedback. Even themselves, even students can provide feedback to each other. And by providing excellent feedback, by providing an opportunity to provide feedback amongst their peers, you are also checking, you're also providing them voices. You're also providing them that trust, that gradual release of responsibility, so that you could also check, oh, this kid is really learning, this kid is really giving good feedback. And by showcasing that they're able to provide good feedback, they would also be motivated to continue doing that on the next activities. And at the same time, on our end, we are also lessening the task that's going to be on our shoulders, especially in remote learning. There would definitely be times that we will have a lot of things on our plate. But if we gradually release some responsibilities for students, or providing them these activities or even opportunities, you are also stressing not only skills on feedbacking, providing peer feedback to others, but you're also strengthening that idea of motivating them to be able to continue the right work that they're engaged with. So those are good tips that we can have in doing or having effective feedback. Your feedback matters. To me, this is my last slide. Your feedback really matters. Our feedback really matters to our students. How can we really provide better feedback? First, give more quality feedback by reducing the number of pieces you really do. As you've seen in the short clip by Edutopia, you really need to reduce a lot of work. Choose where exactly would you put feedback where it's needed the most. Yes, we can give students a lot of practice, a lot of activities which they could utilize to practice rather the skills that you wanted them to practice, for them to be ready and for them to be engaged more with the topic. But as the teacher, give more quality to where can you see all those skills compiled more so that you can reduce the number of work that you're going to check. Number two, utilize digital tools. Try your very best to choose the right digital tools that would enable you to support, automate your classroom processes. Try to utilize digital tools that would automate digital work that you're engaged with so that you could also focus on the other works that you need to look into. Third, be descriptive about your feedback. Don't try your very best to be more objective with giving feedback. Don't be too subjective with providing feedback. If it's possible, try to utilize the rubrics that you gave to your students, so that by sticking to that rubric, you could be able to describe more and provide more task feedback to your students so that they know how you're able to see their work. And when you do process feedback, you could be able to really give them a picture of how you wanted things to be. Fourth, focus on the feedback on students that would challenge them. Meaning, try your very best to really answer questions that are really thought provoking. So not saying that you don't answer those students, but provide also avenues for students to really ask the right questions so that it could be able to really challenge them along the way. Try to consider their affective beliefs. When we give feedback, we got to also, as I mentioned a while ago, try to be very objective, because sometimes when we are very subjective with our feedback, we can have a tendency to be very insensitive about where they come from. We might also at the end of the day, maybe providing certain not so good feelings to our students. Remember, the feedback that we give can make or break our students. Enhance the impact of feedback to our to student motivation. Make sure that the feedback that we give would enable the students to improve their work and improve their motivation in pushing for the type of work that they deliver in your class. Create an environment for learning. In short, not it's not only the teacher that can provide feedback. Allow the students to also provide feedback for their peers. By providing them that opportunity, you are also creating gradual release of responsibility, and at the same time, you empower their voices. You also in a way motivate those students for really providing good feedback, and you also provide them more opportunities to you're providing more opportunities for students to really focus on describing their ideas. Give students ownership of their own learning. So by giving them motivation, you are also providing them an opportunity to really have that pat on their backs that they're doing the right thing. Involve other stakeholders of the school in feedback. Include the parents for feedback. Allow the parents to get to know how exactly do they deliver work. And in that case, by providing them timely feedback on students' work, the parents are already given an assurance, or the parents are given prompts on how to be able to help their children very well. Lastly, consider cultural preferences when we give feedback. It's also important that we are very sensitive in providing feedback, because sometimes religious connotations, or even cultural connotations, or even political preferences may also in a way destroy the way students will be motivated inside the classroom. So whenever we give feedback, stick on describing our task. Again, it will be very helpful if we are going to be looking into the rubric in providing those feedback. So there you have it. Those are things that we look into as we go through making assessment. Today, I discussed to you two important things: assessment, the differences of assessment for assessment, assessment, assessment for learning, and um, assessment as learning. So those are the things that I discussed today. And also I gave you tips on how to provide feedback, the levels of feedback, and stages of feedback. Now, I am very delighted to entertain some questions. If there are probably a couple of questions which would help me in doing the work. Allow me to check our Facebook page if there are a couple of questions for us to look into. Okay, right. Allow me to check those questions. Wait, right. From Miss Evelyn Laleo, how to quarantine honesty in home assessment. I like that. Yes, it's important that we focus on academic honesty in giving feedback or in giving assessments. However, again, it has to be from the very beginning. You got to be able to model to your students how important academic honesty is to you. One, for me, one way to be able to engage into academic honesty is allowing them to always cite sources. You always provide them example. If they're doing presentations, you got to allow them to always cite sources of where they got their materials. It's important that you give that to their students, and also in utilizing some tools as we go through formative assessment in module 2 next Saturday. I will also provide suggest certain tools that you can utilize so that you could be able to ensured rather that your students are really giving importance to academic honesty. Kasi I know this is one of the apprehensions of teachers as they go through remote learning. So important that we really focus on that, citing sources, utilizing credible sources in creating, producing tasks or output in remote learning. At the same time, we teachers should also be mindful of certain applications that would allow us to check if these materials or if these outputs are taken from someone's sources and not well cited. So kailangan meron tayong knowledge on how to be able to utilize those things. And at the same time, it's value for me, values yun eh. Kailangan before we even begin our class, patunayan natin, we have to model our talk. We have to walk our talk. If we really value academic honesty, we got to showcase to our students that we indeed value those things. So I hope I was able to answer your question, Miss Evelyn. We will further look into that in the next module. Okay? How from Sir Joey Morales, how can assessment of learning or for learning be done to students who have no access on IT or no internet resources at all? Very good question. Formative assessments, if you're into modular learning, I'm sure you as teachers can provide a lot of exercises which can be placed in your modules, right? If your courses will be modular, I'm sure when you give the modules to the students, it will not only be given one kind of assessment at all. We will not depend on one exercise or assessment at all. As the students undergo the process of learning, ensure that the modules will be packed with a lot of exercises. So example, if the unit is composed of several topics, before the students will have to move to another topic, provide assessments in those topics so that even the parents can even check if their children, if the student was able to really have a grasp of the understanding that they're going to undergo, they're going to read. So parang libro, dapat meron pong mga check-up quiz, check-up understanding, meron din pong mga part doon na pwede silang magsulat para masiguro po natin na nakukuha po nila yung content at even lumalalim po yung understanding nila on a specific topic. So dapat po meron po before they jump to another topic, before they jump on I'm sure a unit will be composed of several topics. Before they jump to another topic, dapat meron po kayong formative assessments that you can give to the students. I hope I was able to answer your question, Sir Joey Morales. Thank you for that question. Sir Jobert Alibania, how to assess online learning process of the learners? What are the things should we consider, like validity of assessment? In the next module, I will be focusing on formative assessment. So, importante, as mentioned by Dr. Lorna Earl, we will not only focus on summative assessments alone. When we do formative assessment, it could already be a sign for us na baka mahihirapan to sa summative assessment kasi sa formative assessment pa lang, nahihirapan na sila. So how do you assess online learning? Provide them exercises. Example, you can even utilize gamified quizzes. You can even utilize, let's say, a while ago I showcased Poll Everywhere. Poll Everywhere is already a good tool for assessing what exactly did the students learn on a certain topic that you introduced to them. By eliciting prior knowledge, a while ago I showcased to you eliciting prior knowledge. With Poll Everywhere right away, real time, you're already getting data from your students. So by knowing certain digital tools, you would be able to really engage well with your students so that by utilizing these tools, you could be able to utilize the data. You could be able to utilize those information that you get from your students so that it could be a guide for you in teaching those content. Hindi nyo na kailangan tutukan. Pag nakita nyo, magaganda yung grade nila dito sa percentage ng topic na to. Pwede mo nang iwanan yung mga topic na yon at tutukan yung mga topic na medyo na mababa yung grade nila. So, next term or next session, I will be introducing you some tools which you can utilize for formative assessments. Now, what are the things you should consider? Again, when you do assessment, dapat again, marunong naman tayo. If you're very familiar of the digital tools that you're going to use, it can provide you item analysis. It can provide you significant data that you can utilize to check if indeed the students were able to get what you presented to them, and that data can also serve to you as a guide if you need to focus on deepened learning for that specific tool. Kaya nga, next week, as I said, I will introduce certain materials which you can utilize in doing these types of assessment. Lore Harsha Bustamante, here's your question. Is there a difference between assessment and evaluation? Right. Good question. Definitely, I will be introducing that idea also next meeting. Assessment plainly is focused on how are we able to really when we talk of assessment, we are focused on how we're able to look into the process of learning, the idea of how we're able to gain the amount of learning that the students gain in undergoing with you. So those are feedback. Assessment would provide you insights or feedback that would showcase how much did the students know and learn as they go through teaching learning process with you. However, evaluation, when we talk of evaluation, we judge them. There's already a value judgment when we talk of evaluation based on the standards that we have vis-a-vis the teaching learning process. So evaluation is a feedback from the instructor. It's also kind of feedback that we can give to the students, but again, based on the methods and the measures that would be allowing you to judge the student on a certain content or a certain thing that you're teaching them. I hope I was able to differentiate the two in one way or another now. But again, you cannot interchange one from the other. One is different from another. I will explain that. I will deepen that in module number 2. Abby, um, Abby Quesada de Guzman, in conducting such assessment, how can you minimize or avoid cheating? I like that question. Mostly our teachers would have apprehension in digital learning, in doing remote learning. That's why I often, whenever you do digital assessments, I often focus on formative assessment when you introduce, example, gamified tools, gamified quizzes. They're only formative. But if you wanted to engage into summative assessment, provide them more avenues to really engage into deep and summative assessment, which would have rubrics for grading, and also authentic assessments, which would be focused on creating performance tasks, so that they could be able to demonstrate the amount of learning that they underwent in the teaching learning process. So by creating authentic tasks, creating authentic outputs from performance tasks, we could be able to really lessen cheating, because we provide them standards on how to be able to really do the work. However, the challenge for us as teachers is to really provide um, feedback, provide excellent feedback on the process that they do, so that as they create the final output, you have to provide them scaffolds of learning, so that they could be able to really achieve how exactly you wanted them to produce the type of output. Okay. How do assessment? I already answered this. Sorry. In remote setup, are students given subject schedule to do their tasks stated in the module, and especially in doing the assessment task? Right. Nice question. Of course, you need to be able to provide ample time for the students to be able to produce an output. You don't just give them, example, if the module was given today, you got to be able to make them submit the following day. Of course, that wouldn't be possible. As teachers, we need, as I mentioned in the previous slides, you need to be able to really design your work well. By designing your work well, you could be able to really ensure that your students are given the right time, so that they could be able to manifest the right skill. And at the same time, you have to be able to give them the right guidance, so that they could be able to really produce the right output. So, time is important. Kung tayo nga mismong mga teacher, kailangan natin ng time para mag-check. Paano pa kaya yung mga batang hinuhubog pa lang natin para maging mamamayan ng ating bansa? Kailangan nila ng tamang practice. Kailangan nila ng tamang panahon para magawa yung pinagagawa natin sa kanila. So definitely you need to, while there will be deadlines, of course, in real life there will be deadlines. They would be confronted with deadlines. However, you need to provide them enough time to be able to really produce the output you really need them to produce. Okay, I hope I was able to answer those questions excellently. Last 4 questions po, ma'am. Okay, parang my session is until 1 o'clock. Medyo overtime na ako. Perhaps I would try my very best to answer these questions on Facebook. If these are comments from Facebook, I will I will type my answers to the questions. I will definitely make time to answer your questions. But again, I invite everybody to really, Module 1 is up already on Schoology. Try your very best to explore on Module 1. I can't wait to see you again on Module 2. A recording of this session will be placed on our Schoology course, so that you could always go back to it and eventually review it, so that it would help you build more knowledge as we go through formative assessments next week. I will be providing you insights on how to create formative assessments, and I will also highlight some features of Schoology, which will enable you to look into formative assessments next week. So there you have it. I really enjoyed this day with you. Thank you very much for spending your Saturday with me for an hour. Next week, Saturday, from 12 to 1. Again, I hope to be able to see you again engaging with me on assessing effectively on remote learning. Thank you very much and have a great day. Thank you.